you to the February meeting of the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board. We'll call the meeting to order. It is 9:05. Let's see here. We'll go ahead with a roll call. Dr. Way.
Here.
Representative Will. Representative Benavides.
Here.
Representative Exum.
Good morning.
Morning. Councilmember Joseph. Don't see Junie yet. Commissioner Chimino.
Here.
Morning. Director Redhorse.
Good morning.
Morning. Dr. Limerick.
Here.
Director Barry. Don't see Karen. Mr. Benitez is unable to attend. Ms. Nelson. Do not see Terry yet. Dr. Gonzalez.
Here. Good
Good morning. Director Ritter. Good morning. And Director Garcia.
Yes, present.
Great. Okay, so it looks like we've got everyone present except for Councilmember Joseph, Director Barry, Mr. Benitez, and Ms. Nelson. Okay, with that, again, we will appoint a temporary chair here to walk us through the first part of the agenda. I'm willing to continue to serve as temporary chair if there's a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, on to the agenda. You've been sent the agenda there by Johnny. Are there any comments, additions, edits? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion by Director Ritter and a second by Commissioner Chimino. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to reviewing and approving the January meeting summary. Again, you got a copy of the summary in your email. And are there any comments or discussion?
Tim, I have
yes.
a very quick question. On approving the agenda, you do say at the end of the materials that you sent to the board in the email that you'll be nominating board officers at this meeting based on the bylaws, but that's actually not in the agenda. Does it need to be?
It's in the agenda on item number 6, nominate and approval of officers. Is that what you're asking?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you.
Cool. Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion or comments regarding the January meeting summary? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move to approve the summary of last month's meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Got a motion and a second by Dr. Limerick. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now on to the nomination and approval of officers. Per our bylaws that we passed last month, you've got a copy of that in the mail. Johnny will be working with each of you to get our signatures on that document, but we did identify the designation of one board chair and one vice chair. Is there any interest or nominations for chair? Don't be shy.
I hope it's appropriate for a state employee to serve, but I would nominate Tim Mauk. I think he's been doing an extraordinary job personally of managing this very complex work.
I'll second that.
We've got a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone else interested in serving as chair? Don't be shy. I will be happy to run your campaign.
I move we close nominations.
Got a motion to move to close nominations. By acclamation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and on to the motion is Tim Mock for chair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Well, I am honored. Thank you very much. And this is just for a short time. And then next, vice chair. Is there any interest in vice chair? Remember, the vice chair becomes the next chair. Representative Benavides?
I haven't spoken to her, but I'd like to nominate Catherine Redhorse.
Okay.
Second.
Can we politely decline?
I'll withdraw
Only
my
at this
second.
point, trying to get CCI up and running, and I'm not sure the timing is right.
Representative Benavides?
I'll withdraw, but can I make another one?
Yes.
I haven't spoken to her either, but I'd like to nominate Nikki Gonzalez. And honestly, I'm looking for some people that, not that, Tim, you're doing a great job, but I don't want everybody to be government, state of government employees.
Yep.
That's fair.
Yep.
I'll second that.
Dr. Gonzalez, you're in the hot seat. We're only allowed one person to decline these positions. It looks like Dr. Redhorse beat you to it. Do you accept it? Do you have any comments regarding the nomination?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Representative Benavides. The timing might not be great, but I can do my best. So, yeah, I guess I accept.
Okay, very good. Well, we appreciate that. Are there any other nominations?
I move we close nominations and vote by acclamation.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second?
A second.
By acclamation to close nominations, aye.
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 Okay, and so now to the matter at hand, for Dr. Gonzalez to be appointed as chair. We've got a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Gonzalez, congratulations and thank you very much. We will certainly be willing to work with you on your schedule. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move on here, I'm assuming that we can pump the brake to a little bit later here, but we're making some good headway. So we'll delay that just a little bit unless we need a break 15 minutes in. Is there any other matters of just general discussion that we would like to bring up at this time with the board? If not, we will move to the next agenda item. Okay, and so we will now move on to the consideration of the draft process document. And for this, I will go ahead and share my screen. Assuming I get this correctly. Okay, is my screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay, and we see the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board guidance document pulled up.
Oh, no, no, yes, we do. I was just kidding.
Oh, it is sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, perfect. And Johnny, I'm gonna need some help here because I'm not certain I can see everybody now. So if there is, if you have any discussion items here as we take this on, please feel free to speak up, or we also do have the raise your hand function, and we'll try and keep tabs on that, but I am not able to see very much here.
Okay.
Okay, So first of all, a couple of things I want to say about this. One, a big thanks to Amy and especially Lindsay in the AG's office for their hard work in pulling this together. There was a tremendous amount of work that went into this research into what other states are doing, as well as a conversation with Jennifer Runyon, which we really appreciate having USBGN's input. This document that you're looking at here is a draft, and we're going to work through this here. A couple of pieces, you'll see that this is divided up into some phases here. This is to help us address that we don't have sort of full-time dedicated staff on this commission. So what it helps us do is as a board to actually walk through these naming and renaming proposals, and so that we all have some touch points along the way to consider whether the application is complete, and if it's ready for full conversation. Also an opportunity to divide up some of the work if we need to, and identify what other type of public input research information we might need as we prepare these each way through. It also allows us to take on multiple matters at once and walk them through consideration. I think what we've heard from the USBGN, they will get proposals for the most part very complete to us from their end, or as complete as possible. And we may identify that we want some additional outreach, or some of the outreach has not yet been completed, and we can then take that on. So with that, the other thing that we're thinking about doing here, and I want you to keep in mind as we consider this, is rather than maybe full-on adopting this, we can actually identify, working with the BGN, a couple of proposals that we can walk through this process and then kind of tweak and finalize this. So we kind of give it a bit of a test run. So that's something that we're thinking about along the way here. With that here, I'll just start with the preamble, assuming that you can see that. Basically,
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, can we have a general discussion about this before we go through the whole thing?
Absolutely.
Because when I read this, I have some specific issues about things of how it's written, but generally this process, it seems like it's based on sort of a federal process of how they take public input and how they look at things. Not normally how we do things necessarily in state government, because this has 3 times that it has to appear before our board, which seems really unnecessary because it comes to us as completed, at least the requirements from the federal government. It already comes that way to us. Why we need to do that again, that seems almost just a informational type thing that we could discuss to see if there's any questions. But the second time to have that, and I just think 2 times for a final decision in case something like most, say even in the legislature, most city councils, they do a first reading and then with public testimony and the second where they make decisions kind of thing. This seems like a really complicated process, but the bigger issue was the public input. I have no problems with reaching out to specific entities to invite them because they may not be following our committee and know a proposal in their area is up. But even on this meeting, we take oral public comment in every meeting. And to do it this way, I mean, I'm not discouraging written comments, but the 4th section, that pretty much is all that we're supposed to be doing. And this is just a really convoluted process if we really want to encourage at the state level for people to participate in this. I mean, even the submission, and the process for submission, we tell them to go to this website where we ought to tell them what they need in here. to send it forward instead of they come to us and we say, oh, well, we can't do it. Go to the federal government and take this. And then they'll tell you what they need. But this is a overly complex process for us to evaluate this. And I don't think the public, there's a real interest and concern with this commission and what we're going to be deciding on. And when we make it this complex, it just seems like it's going to throw a wrench in everything. And some people will start reading this and then just give up on it. So, I mean, we could go through each thing, and I don't know how others feel, but the appendixes are a little clearer, and they follow sort of straight kinds of things we're encouraging or discouraging and more guidance. But the actual process document, I think, is way too complex for what we need, and it is not very good as far as public comment.
In Representative Benavides, regarding the public comment, just so I understand, is it that you would prefer that we only take oral argument, or that we or only have public comment during a certain period?
No, I said that I'm not opposed to written comment, and I do think it's important to reach out to certain groups who may not know that we're considering something in their area. I have no problems with that, and to get public comment on that. And just like in the legislature, we allow written comment as well as public comment. But at our meetings, people should be able to come, and it's my hope that eventually we're going to have public meetings, and we may have them in an area of whatever we're considering, so that people there can comment on it. And when you go to public comment on section 4 on page 4, it never talks about oral comments anywhere. And that's the problem. It's saying this is how we do public comment, and it speaks to written proposals. And we should be, which is not in here either, we should be posting these meetings somewhere besides just your website, for people to know that we're going to be discussing something in their areas or around the state, and this doesn't speak to that at all. So how we can truly get public comment from all of the public, not just from local governments and what do we say? Just tribal governments, local governments, and somebody else. So.
Okay, real quick to the one point is that I think from Jennifer Runyon in our conversations, not all of the proposals necessarily always come thoroughly complete and ready to go. They do their best job, and they have some time periods, but they might not have county commissioners, for example, and we might identify that and look at that and say, hey, we need some better outreach to that. And then also in terms of general stakeholders, and so that would help us kind of that first phase, take a look at what's come from USBGN, and then as a group identify where we need to, what else we need included or to seek out to make this process complete. But saying that, are there any other thoughts regarding this in general? What's the board feel about this?
I think it's a good first draft, and I think if we review it piece by piece, we might be able to simplify it a bit, as I think Representative Benavides is suggesting, and hopefully get to a place where we have a good working document. I think regardless, it's going to be a bit cumbersome, and it's going to be a bit complex, and undoubtedly some things are going to be a bit controversial as we do our work. So I suggest we wade in and see if we can make this document the best it is, and perhaps we adjust it 6 months down the road if it is a bit unwieldy or whatnot.
Okay. Other thoughts? Just Just looking for a little extra direction here in terms of the appetite for the board in what direction you want to move here.
Hey, Tim, it's Rick Garcia. Just a question. If this preamble and guidance is amended subsequently, what's the process for that? I don't recall the details in the bylaws. Is it just a simple majority or a change that the board actually would make? I mean, I'm sensitive to Representative Benavides's concerns, but at the same time, I don't know if we, absolutely need to make the changes today. But so I'm curious about the process in the future. I mean, how simple or cumbersome would it be to actually amend this if we see that needs to occur?
Let me see here. That's a good question. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'd have to go back into the bylaws unless AG Amy Beatty, if you know off the top of your head.
I'm looking at the bylaws and it's Article 10 and it says they can be amended at a board meeting by a vote. So then we go back to the votes and the amended amendments take effect immediately. We can do that and we can go through this, but this is like an 8-page document and I'm fine with taking the time and walking through it. I hope members have had a chance to read through it. And if they have, I think they probably would see how cumbersome this document is. So I wouldn't want to adopt a document that is that cumbersome and then with the thought that we can amend it later. Since we're adopting it now. If that's the point, then let's just fix it now before we adopt it.
Okay, yeah, and the other thing is that we could always do, like I said, a test run on these and then kind of tweak it based on our experience with how this goes, is the other opportunity there.
So,
Tim,
Dr.
I'm sorry.
Let me get Dr. Limerick and then I'll come back.
so I have just 2 questions, and one of them with Representative Benavides. If you could maybe point us to what we would change, or where we would get to deleting, or just a tiny bit. I mean, not a this for all the ages, but just some guidance of what would be changing if we could do that. And then I wondered if there's anyone who would like to speak on behalf of cumbersomeness. Is there a reason to remain cumbersome? And sometimes there is. I will tell you confidentially that as a member of the Benson Center Advisory Board here on campus with the John Eastman situation, I wish we had been more cumbersome. So that's not actually a light remark that I'm making here, that if there might be some reason why more elaborateness is in order. I wish we had that with this other organization. So what would we change, and would it be pretty quick for us to look at what we would omit and then consider omitting it? And then if there is indeed some, and there might well be some reason, and maybe Amy would know that, of why we would prefer more to less.
And Chair Mock, Director Ritter has her hand raised.
Yep, Director Ritter.
Hi. Yeah, I was just curious about if there was whether there was a model for these procedures. If we were adopting procedures that have been are in place with other states or other entities. I just wondered what the inspiration for this was.
Yeah, so there was there's just as many states as there are processes, I think is the quick answer to that. But this kind of mashes some of those together, takes some points. I think really that this kind of looks like, if I understand it correctly, Washington State's process. And I think that this allowed us along the way to just have some continual checkpoints because of what we're doing in the sensitivity and the public interest of changing names. It allows us to really kind of, as a group, kind of make sure that, hey, we want to see, or before we go to final consideration, that we really make sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's in terms of getting the information that we all feel we need to make a recommendation. And so then with that, is there any other hands up? And then I think Dr. Limerick, you had a question in terms of what would you change? Representative Benavides, I don't know if you've got some specific things that you noticed right now, or we want to just kind of discuss this along the way. Go
Well,
for it.
I would say, first, we got to wonder who sees this document, because I'm assuming this document is going to be people that have an interest in submitting a proposal, and they will want to know how to submit a proposal. They aren't going to know to go to the federal site. They're going to come to the state site. They're going to pull this proposal, and this proposal we all know because we did all these presentations, and we know the difference between a proposal that's subject to the federal government and a proposal that's not. This doesn't say anything to somebody looking at this about the proposals, that even though we have the authority as a state entity to look at all these proposals, certain proposals are under the federal guidance. And as a result, those need to be submitted directly to the federal government and have that address. And that if we get any proposals, we will direct them that way. It doesn't say that anywhere. When you go, and then the review process, I mean, once, somewhere in here, it says that first the federal government determines that, that they're sufficient, meaning I guess all of the documents, the forms, everything that they need for their review has been submitted. And then they send it ultimately to us. But the process for us to review these proposals is very cumbersome, because that starts in section 3. We have we have 3 different considerations as the board that we have to look at this. The first one is the initial one under section 3. We are looking at this, and I'm guessing from this, I mean, it's even hard for me to understand, that we have some real general preliminary discussion. And then we, as far as I can tell, we don't take any vote. But then the second consideration talks about we're closing we vote to close the initial consideration. Well, I don't know why we need to do that when all we're doing is generally looking at it in the first one. And then the second one, it has criteria of what we look at, and we can get to a preliminary recommendation then. And that is like the substance of what we're doing. And we'll be looking at all the things that came in. Then we get to information on public comment. And then ultimately, we say a second consideration, but then we have to have a meeting to reconsider if we need to, or look at it again, and then it goes to the governor. There's some issues with it going to the governor that he can reject it. I'm so sorry, my dogs are here with me. It's just, I don't know if you all took the time to read it, and it's just me that's a little dense of reading this complicated process. So those are just general comments. I mean, I'm not telling you the specifics in any one.
I think I'm hearing then a couple of things in Representative Benavides, correct me if I'm wrong. I think one is you're asking for us to really be clear in terms of what types of proposals are considered, and whether they're considered directly by us or then by the USBGN within their process. And if that's the case, we forward to them, but we also include in this what those proposals look like. I'm assuming that you would agree with that. We want the proposals in every state except for one. All the proposals start with the BGN and go there. And then the BGN does their broader outreach to tribes and local officials. And then they close it based on a sort of timeline, and then we'll forward that on. Sometimes we've got multiple proposals. I'll give you like Mount Evans, for example, where you have multiple proposals, and the proponents are actually continuing to work together and to refine those proposals. So something like that isn't quite ready for it to be passed down from the BGN for our consideration while that's kind of being taken care of. Did I get that first part correct?
Kind of, sort of, because again, maybe we should have a discussion about what is the purpose of this document and who will be looking at it. because that goes to the cumbersome issue. Because who is this, just an internal document for us board members? Or is this expected that the public's going to see this? So think if you were the public and didn't really know, but you had an idea to name something, what would looking at this get you? You wouldn't really know what our purpose is for, and that we look at both kinds of proposals. But the ones that are under the authority of the federal board, those follow this guidance and say we will later have a policy for ones that can be submitted to us directly. But I think we're going to get a lot of people that don't know the difference, and they're going to be coming to us with proposals. And then we also have to figure out who decides if they come to us, that we send them to the federal government or we take them.
Yeah, Dr. Limerick.
I have a vision, which may seem very pedestrian, which is that maybe this is our internal document, and we also have a thing that I think people out in the world are much more inclined to go to, that frequently asked questions sort of document. So that maybe we have a multimedia presentation here, which is not turning into that, but if this were an internal document and it was cumbersome, that would be one thing if it were standing by itself. But if it came with a lively, clear FAQ kind of thing, that would probably be where most people would go anyway. I don't know, something may be deficient in me, but I don't know that I would go instantly to an organization's formal documents if I could go someplace that was really clearly pitched to, this is what you need to know.
Yeah, I think that's how we're thinking about this, is that this would actually be, this is the guidance document for the board. But then I hear what you're saying, Representative Benavides, is that we really actually need to lay out a public-facing process for the public to understand and follow in terms of their submissions. I would surmise that that looks a little bit different than this document here.
I guess I would say it would look really different. It would have responsible content that would relate on that, but I think it could be written in a tone that would be quite different from this.
Yes, and we can even start on that also and work something like that up for the public facing. Other thoughts? Do we want to walk through this then, or do we want to have a larger general conversation? Okay, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and walk through this, unless Representative Will, were you about to say something there?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I think we should walk through it.
Okay, Dr. Limerick?
Still just we will have a quicker walk probably if we are thinking that this is not the document that we would expect the public to go to. If we were thinking there should be another document, I think we'll romp through it, if you will. We may not romp, but we will move much more briskly through it if we are thinking in terms of this accompanies but is not in the least interchangeable with the public address document.
Yes, I would agree with that. So we will create.
If that's the premise, that everyone would.
We will create a separate public-facing document. Does that sound okay to everybody, or are we looking for them to be one and the same?
Woohoo, woohoo. Hey.
I'm fine with that as long as they go out at the same time, because this goes out before that.
Yeah,
it's not at all helpful.
I agree completely. I think
okay.
That's absolutely right.
Then that helps us out. That's the assumption here we are working on, that we will have this document here is the internal board process, and we will actually have a public-facing document that lays out the process very clearly, and we will begin working on that for our website and distribution and sharing with the public in terms of that process. Okay, cool. So with this, this is then, we'll start with the preamble, just kind of provides that this is the guidance document within the US BGN purview, and what they do, and concerns name changes to and names for and name controversies pertaining to strictly natural geographic features as defined. And then, unless there's any comments on the preamble, moving to the guidance here is where we start kind of identifying this process a little bit more. And that is that we direct proposals for geographic features to the USBGN for submission via their process. There is a link that we lay out there at the bottom under section 1B where proposals are submitted, as well as an address for individuals to mail to. So geographic names goes to the BGN first, essentially.
Could I ask who's making the decision? Because assuming they contact us, who's deciding should this go to the government or should it go somewhere else?
I think we can, if someone does ping us and have a question, and we do have contact information on our website, and we'll continue to beef that up. If we realize that it's not something that's within that's not pertaining to a geographic feature, then we can set that aside. And that's that second bucket that this board has, that we will then develop a secondary process. We really want to focus on the BGN proposals right now that are already backed up that we want to begin working through. So we're going to do that. Also the BGN, we receive those quarterly updates in terms of those proposals, and also remain in constant conversation with Jennifer Runyon. So I'm assuming that if something comes in that does not pertain to a geographic feature, that will be communicated then via Jennifer Runyon, and we can then reach out to put them on the correct path for the second batch of proposals that we might consider if it would fall into that. And that depends on what that sort of is. It's got to be within state purview, essentially, for us to have some level of authority. But that's kind of what we want to set aside for right now and work through the BGN stuff. So typically what comes into the BGN, they'll communicate that this is part of their process or this is not. And we will then have ongoing conversations with the BGN about that. Any further comments, questions, discussion? So goes to the BGN essentially there. And then coming down to section 2, the USBGN review process. This essentially lays out the BGN's initial steps that they take. And that is in terms of their quarterly review list that this gets added to, and then also seeking communication or input from all tribal governments, Tribal Historic Preservation Office grant programs, and counties or local jurisdictions. So that's usually what the BGN does. Not all of that information is always submit. You mentioned, and as a former county commissioner, sometimes we are overwhelmed with our work on a local level, and county commissioners, for example, don't always turn around and reply necessarily. But there's a timeline on all of that for the BGN. So this is pretty straightforward bucket stuff of what the BGN's process looks like. Any questions there? All right, and then section 3 here gets into the processes for our board consideration. So once the BGN feels that they've got their proposal as far as they can take it, or deem it's ready for the state's consideration, we will be in touch with them. They will transmit to us the name change proposal, to the board administrator, and our process will then commence. It will, right now, like I said, we've kind of envisioned this. It has 3 phases. Section 2A here is the process then for initial consideration. And under this here, once we receive that proposal, the board administrator will place it on the agenda for the next board meeting for us to review the material that's come in from the USBGN. And we will share that then with all of the board members. And it should include summary information essentially, and materials, any existing public comments, preliminary outreach, and preliminary research that has already been done. We will post that onto our website. We will also then outreach to the proponent of the proposals and let them know that the process has begun. And then the initial consideration at our next board meeting, we'll be looking at this. And because of the difficulty in contacting everybody, we will then consider what needs to go into this proposal and what needs to be done to it to take it to the next level of consideration. We welcome public comment, and I think that Representative Benavides did identify something that is important. It talked about the section 4 below. I don't think we meant to leave out oral public comment, and so we will definitely, I believe, accept that and design that in. But we can have that conversation when we get to section 4. But this is where we then begin taking additional public comment during this phase. And then under section here, subsection 3, Roman numeral 3, the board will identify next steps. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my paper, not moving the screen here. The board will identify the next step for the name change proposal. Now, this is where we kind of really did some research and looked at what other states are doing, because other states vary from boards to, in some states, literally one individual is sort of their naming board. With the staff, the lack of, I think, dedicated staff, thinking about that, this is an opportunity for us to involve board members if we would like to go this route, and identify a board member as the steward of the name change proposal to kind of help shepherd it through the process here. Or whether it's dynamic enough, let's say, whether we need a committee or a task force to assist with moving this through the process, performing additional outreach and such. Any comments about this? Director Garcia.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I don't know exactly what the best process would be, but one thing I think would not make sense is to assign this to a single individual to make the determination what goes forward and what doesn't. It seems to me it would need to be as broad of a group of either existing commission members or others that need to be in that process. I don't know the numbers or the who's of those individuals, but nevertheless, I think one individual is probably not the best way to go.
Okay, thoughts about that?
Jim, I think, you know, as far as naming a steward, if it's in your backyard and you have the most knowledge about it as a member or something, that I think it's fine to be named as a steward. I don't think you're making the decision. That's the whole board. But maybe if you have the local knowledge and intimate knowledge about what maybe a proposal in an area you're very familiar with, I don't see any problem in naming a steward.
Okay, Representative Benavides.
I was just going to say, I don't, it's a tough one because we don't know what steward the proposal means. Does that just mean the person has to go out and talk to all the groups, or they do something? I don't know exactly what we mean by it.
Yeah, so really what we mean by this is, and everybody on this board has been appointed because of a level of expertise and knowledge in sort of various parts of our state and stakeholders that are interested in our geographic features. And so what we're thinking about this is, and I think last month when we talked, we might have had the word advocate in there, and that's not what we're looking for, is somebody to advocate or be supportive of a particular proposal, but an individual or individuals to basically help walk it through the process in terms of identifying things that we need and performing some outreach, but also identifying who would be most appropriate for certain outreach. So I think that's kind of what we're looking for, is this would kind of function as just a precursory kind of look in terms of what this proposal needs, and kind of help move it forward, make sure that we're keeping on pace. Dr. Limerick?
I don't know. I was going to say that if I were in that position, I feel I would do a better job if I had a partner with whom I was tracking and trading ideas, that rather than, okay, now I am presenting my findings. It just seems like my performance, and this may be idiosyncratic, but it always gets better if I have sort of field tested the ideas before I am putting them forward to a whole body. So I think that is true of others besides myself. And there's nothing, I assume there's nothing in terms of the communications that wouldn't be in violation of sunshine laws, that the person, the steward, could talk to other people on the board and say, am I missing something here? But I can just see for myself, and maybe for others, that there would be an advantage to have field tested the ideas in a smaller, just even a pair. So just a thought, and I can think of ways that I could manage myself better in that situation, so I wouldn't change it on my behalf, but I just wonder if there might be some gain in having that chance to test out ideas. If it's a simple case, no, but if there's complexities and conflicting opinions, then I think I would prefer the field testing with a pal or comrade or colleague.
A.G. Beatty, can you comment on that in regards to, I think, and maybe you could help us out with the difference between if we have a handful of individuals or two individuals under item 1 there, or if it's a committee, the level to which it's a violation or potential violation for open meeting laws.
Yeah, this Director Limerick, thanks for sharing your desire to have fellow travelers as you're trying to make your way through these potentially complex processes. We would need to be pretty careful about the open meetings law. And because this is the board's quote unquote public business, that it would be a proposal before the board that the board would ultimately vote on, the open meetings law is likely to be triggered. We could look on a case-by-case basis, but a structure where you all were able to sort of have side conversations outside the view of the public would be problematic from an open meetings law perspective. So we would just need to be careful and create structure for you.
If it was 2 proposal stewards in pairs, and that was an official appointment, and those 2 people had that charge, would that take it out of the zone of casual, not appropriate, off the record conversation, or would that just make it worse because we had built that?
It doesn't. It puts it directly in the purview of the open meetings law, which says 2 or more board members discussing public business. So even if it were blessed in a more formal guidance document, you could still run afoul of the open meetings law.
Okay, I think I understand. Well, I'm sitting corrected. I'm just, I think, no standing anymore. No more standing.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we could design a process that, or put some sideboards around that so that we don't violate the open meeting laws. Okay. Representative Benavides.
Oh, I was going backwards a little bit. Are we done with the discussion on that, or do we have to take a vote on that, or what?
Let's, before we go back, let's just make sure, see where we are here. I'm hearing at least this ought to be amended for at least 2 board members. Director Garcia, I'm looking at you. Would that be fine, or do you want to make it at least 3 individuals? Or what's the magic number there?
Yeah, I think I defer to council to establish, what, does 3 make that much more difference, or is 2 just as difficult in terms of avoiding public meeting laws? I think 2 or 3 is fine. I was just concerned about a single individual. I think it looks kind of proprietary, too much in that regard. I think it's better if there's more than 1. 2 would be fine, 3 maybe be best, but I'll defer to legal counsel on that one.
Okay, and then this is just some things that we kind of consider. We may not even have to go here in terms of forming these. We may be able to identify other mechanisms, or that the proposal looks pretty good, but we can then, I think, amend this to a nomination of, I'm just going to say board members. If we do just an S perhaps right there, and we'll kind of put a pin in this right now, seeking to get more than 1. Any thoughts? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Representative Will.
Is that not covered in, considering a task force? I mean, if we go to 2 to 3, is that, I don't know, is that not already covered?
Yeah, I think that's sort of how many does a committee make? Is that 2 individuals or 3? And maybe that we might be covered under that. AG Beatty, do you have any comment on that, between the difference between the committee and 2 individuals or 1, or do we?
There's no legal definition of committee. So if you wanted to assign 2 people, you're probably creating a committee of the board. And then under the open meetings law, if that committee were going to meet to talk about the business before the board, we would just have to notice it and make it available to the public.
Director Garcia, does that make sense? Is that? Okay. So let's keep that, because there might be some situations that we have, 1 board member might be able to do some of the background work, and then, or this is our part to consider whether we should have multiple individuals kind of assigned as a committee to walk this proposal through. Representative Benavides, back to you. You're on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know when we went through it really quick, we're still in the initial consideration thing, and
Yes.
we passed by at the top of page 3, Appendix A. So I wanted to make sure that the members of the board understood Appendix A has some things for some of the members to do in it. Like say the member occupying the History Colorado seat should identify and solicit specific input from groups. The person on Colorado Commission on Indian Affairs, the requirement is on them. There's some, so I didn't want us to go so quickly over A, because A on community outreach, there's also, because we've only talked about local governments and tribes, but what about, and who would do, say, nearby property owners? I would think they would have some interest in a change. Or if there's, I know it's generally about community organizations, and that's one piece of it, but still on comment. Initial consideration is the first time we as board members are seeing it. And so it talks about that we really should, on page 3, Roman numeral 2, It says it's welcome, public comment is welcome at this stage, particularly from the applicant. But again, it's the first time we're seeing it ourselves. So, and you have Appendix A reaching out. Well, we don't reach out if we've never seen it before. So I guess we're kind of, the way that should be is that we're asked to reach out for, because it does say between the initial consideration and the next stage, we'll solicit comments, and so board members, according to A, would do that as well. It just, I don't know. I don't think it's real clear, but I wanted to make sure board members saw Appendix A, because we didn't really go through it.
Yeah, and we can, I'm happy to sort of take those now or as we get there. I think that's a good point, Representative Benavides, and I think you've identified at least one. There's probably others in terms of guidance. It's not a limiting roles or levels of outreach by any means, but we can certainly also amend that to include some others, including the nearby property owners on that. So let's, we will kind of, let's set that one aside towards the end of the document. We can kind of revisit that unless we want to talk about that right now. Okay. Yes, Representative Will.
Well, my comment is that, and I agree with Representative Benavides. I mean, it does say it's not an exhaustive list, but the neighbors is huge in this, so I would totally agree.
Representative Benavides, let me ping you one more time here in terms of the public comment. I know that you mentioned that we've identified some outreach to the proponent and to others. Would you prefer to put public comment into the later into the second and third phases, or?
No, I think we have to have, just like today, we have public comment at every meeting. But when we think of this, again, it's the initial time we're seeing it as a board. I'm assuming, even though it's unsaid, that somebody will let the applicant know this is on the agenda so they could come in and answer questions. But we're trying to, and depending on where in the state this applicant is, we probably should consider some video testimony, because it's the first time we're hearing about it as the board. So they'll come and they'll tell us general comments, maybe why they're doing this, proposing this. But then when we get to actual recommendations, they should probably be there as well the second time. And somebody needs to reach out to them. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that because on the bottom of 2, it says between this initial consideration and the next stage, we will solicit the public comment per Appendix A. So that's anticipating we want more of that for the next one. But I wouldn't say we don't. If somebody wants to speak and is there, sees it on the agenda, we should hear from them.
Yeah, this, I think you're spot on. We really are looking for as much public comment and provide as much opportunity. And I think that that's something also that you raise a good point in terms of that public facing document, to make sure that not only there, but then when we reach out and have these conversations with the proponent, that they are able to attend along the way and provide some input. And if you'd like, we could even, let me see here. Yeah, and so during that stage, this initial consideration, we certainly invite the comment from the applicants.
So Chair Muck, in section 3A, I believe it, or 3B maybe, it does say that we would contact the proponent of the name change proposal.
Yes, yes, perfect. Thanks, Johnny. Okay, so once we've had that conversation essentially about what we want to see and identify potential stewards, and discuss some of the details and the community outreach that we want to do. The board would then vote to move this to the next phase. And so that would be the second consideration. Representative Benavides.
Well, why do we have to vote on that? And I don't like what we're calling this, because the initial consideration is we're just getting it. So maybe it's introduction for review or something. And then the next one is our actual, instead of a second consideration, it's actually the consideration of the proposal, because that's when we're going to be talking about if we want to do it or not, or changes to it.
Okay.
That instead of calling it what we're calling it, that doesn't make sense. And I don't know why we have to vote for that. And it doesn't really have us voting in that first part. It just says we did vote at the start of the second part.
Okay.
Or it does say we have to vote, but I don't see why.
Okay, so after that initial conversation and identifying potentially stewards and the community outreach, then we automatically just move it to the second consideration phase. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes.
Okay, are we okay with that? Okay, I will, unless there's any other conversation or hands raised, we will strike the voting there, and that is fine. We can just go ahead and move it forward. I'm sorry, let me just pull it up in the document there. So, and we'll just make a note here that once the initial phase, this moves, and we'll refine that. There. Okay. How we doing? We're at 10:07. We want to get everybody out of here on time. Do we need a break? We're an hour and 7 minutes in. Break or keep going forward? If one person wants a break, we'll call the break. Hearing no excitement for a break, we will continue to move forward here. Okay. So then we're into the second consideration phase. Once we've done the initial consideration. And this is where I think we'll have to alter the top here where it says the board votes to close the initial phase. So we will work on amending that also.
In that paragraph, you might want to consider, because it says the second review will occur at the next board meeting following the vote. I would just say at a subsequent will be scheduled at some point or something, because what if we have something that the governor gives us to look at right away or something? I just think we're locking ourselves in unnecessarily.
I think that's perfectly fine. Do we have any concerns there? I could certainly see something like that, or unanticipated circumstances where we might take up some other matter. So, okay. So here then, draw your attention to, we'll consider the criteria outlined in Appendix B. And so just to draw your attention down to page 8 with Appendix B while we are here, there are certain factors that the board may wish to consider and how these factors influence. And so we kind of identify here proposals containing the following characteristics are generally favored. And these are similar to some of the guidelines that the USBGN operates under. And something for us to pay attention to. Again, not limited to this necessarily, so we can amend this if we so desire, but just as some general sort of borderlines here, and that's dominant local usage. Names that are in dominant local usage and are strongly supported by local residents will be favored. Proponents should submit appropriate evidence of local usage and resident support. I think, again, a lot of this, back to Representative Benavides' original point, a lot of this will have to be kind of in a public-facing type of document in terms of what we are looking for the criteria. I think that's important. Also, the historical significance, the use of the Roman alphabet, I think that's certainly required by the USBGN. And then proposals made to eliminate existing name problems. And then it also identifies those proposals which the following characteristics will be discouraged. Obviously, offensive and derogatory names, duplicate names, commercial names, and wilderness names. So again, we are going to welcome the public comment again at this consideration. And then we make a preliminary recommendation during this phase of the process to occur by a vote to move this out of the second consideration phase and into the final phase that we'll get to below. Comments? Okay. Dr. Limerick, are you looking for the mute button?
I guess I'm going to just raise a quick question, if I could, about the, oh Lord, I don't want to do this because I totally get that local preference comes first. I absolutely get that. And I'm a Western American historian. If I didn't respect that, I should be put out of business. But I just wonder with some, maybe especially with public lands, state lands included, or that there's just such a sense of Colorado-ness and identity-ness that it goes beyond the immediate proximity of the place. So I'm perfectly happy to have just kept, if it turned out I just kept my mute button on and nobody heard me say anything, that would be fine too. But I just thought I would make that statement, and not in any way to overrule the power and significance of local preference on that, but just to raise that question about the people who may not be in proximity, but who really care. So that's it.
Thoughts or any further discussion on the issue Dr. Limerick raises? How should we think about that dominant local usage? Is it a preference? Is the language there correct, or do we give it some weight or something to take into consideration?
This is Catherine, and I think just to that, I guess the question is, the perspective of Indigenous, because I think, there have been those tribal nations who have been misplaced from Colorado, and no longer have trust lands within Colorado, but they still have strong ties to the land. And so I think that use of that phrase disqualifies them from having priority when they were the original stewards of the land.
I take that as really the comment that I would have made.
Okay.
But also there's kinship ties and family ties that for some non-Indian people, absolutely, that given the forced relocation of these folks, that does give different meanings to local.
So I've pulled up here Appendix B that we're considering, and this is that first bullet point.
Hey, Tim, can I share an idea with you?
Yes, please.
Director Redhorse, we had so many comment bubbles in these criteria where Lindsay and I were thinking that your overlay and very sort of careful and thoughtful approach to those bullet points would be really helpful. So I wonder if we don't if you wouldn't mind actually just looking at those criteria and making recommendations to us to make sure that the outreach is thorough, that the priorities are careful and thoughtful about the sort of layers of priorities, so that there's a good solid tribal lens in the criteria, and that we don't actually try to get to it now, but that we get feedback from you, since I think Tim's proposal is to kind of take this out for a test drive before even adopting it. So there will be room to provide better feedback and input about this Appendix B.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, that'd be perfect if you wouldn't mind providing some of that. And I'm also I think the point that you raise is very good and something that we should consider. And even if it was dominant local usage, or you include the names that are dominant local usage or indigenous, I don't know what that sort of looks like, but are we okay with Dr. Redhorse assisting with us on some of that language there?
As long as you don't say Dr. Redhorse, it's director.
Director.
Yeah.
I think that I'm certainly fine with Catherine doing that, but I think that the next bullet point also has plays into that well. I mean, I wouldn't want some certain things commemorated, even though they're part of our history. So if she looks at both of those, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm off mute. Rick Garcia. I'm curious about jumping back to the top bullet here, the dominant local usage. Is it appropriate to say will be favored, or are we waiting? I mean, is it the intent that we're weighting this characteristic more so than others? Would something more neutral be better, like will be considered? I'm curious about that language, where that originated. Was that something that we agreed to earlier on, or it just ends up being in line from whatever language we borrowed to create this particular section?
Yeah, A.G. Beatty, do you want to?
Yeah, this is cobbled together from some other states and their processes. It was really helpful to look, to not sort of try to create things from scratch, but to look at what had tried and true, look at states that had pretty tried and true processes. This language comes from Washington. They have a model that's similar to what we're proposing here. And that dominant local usage was something that they had said was really helpful for them. So for example, if everyone calls it Buttercup Peak, but on a map it says something different, then we thought a name change would be appropriate to reference Buttercup Peak. But it's not something that is legally required, and it is certainly something that you could even just eliminate from these criteria. But we wanted to make sure that there was some consideration if there is local energy around a particular name. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. It does help. I'm just, and I think that example probably is understandable for use of this language. I'm just thinking about other, offensive names that some folks still may favor. Because it's been long standing. I just don't know if this leads the board into an area that we're weighting this more heavily than other criteria. That's my general question, by using the word favored. That's all I'm asking about.
Right, and if I could say that both Catherine and Garcia have both said what I wanted to say far more effectively than I did, but I guess I'm wondering, would we say favored when the headline there is proposals containing the following characteristics are generally favored? So we are repeating the word favored as if it were to have, I don't know what more weight, but will be carefully noted, or will be, is there some, I guess I'm kind of,
are just considered. Yeah.
I guess I would say considered would mean, I mean, that seems to maybe take too much.
So what if we were to just do this? Sorry to interrupt real quick. You know, it does have the headline, proposals containing the following characteristics are generally favored. And then just say dominant local usage, names that are in dominant local usage and are strongly supported by local residents, period. And recognizing also that we're going to amend this to be more inclusive of indigenous names as well.
I'm okay with that. I also, though, now I'm going to sort of switch sides, that I think local people in Colorado, Western Snow people, also in Colorado, have good reason to be jumpy about being overruled by distant people, urbanites. So I guess I'm thinking I wouldn't mind something like "will be carefully noted," just as a recognition that there's something there. And I guess the fact that it's the first point is also good. But I would just think, having hung out in circles where I should hang out, I just have that sense that just make a gesture of, we see that as weighty, but we don't say it outweighs indigenous people or anything like that. So, okay, so this will be my last remark on this, but I would go for "will be carefully noted," something on that order.
And Chair Mock, Director Ritter has her hand raised.
Okay, let me go with Director Ritter then, and then I think Representative Benavides next.
And if I'm not jumping too far ahead, the use of the Roman alphabet, and I'm not sure if this is the right context to raise this in, but as I was reading through those materials, specifically the one, oh gosh, I'm not sure if I'm going to say it right, even in English, Mount Mastanta, it occurred to me that perhaps we might consider an approach, you know, that is adopted elsewhere in the world. For instance, if you ever travel through Basque country, you often see the dominant language represented, as well as the Basque language, you know, the other language that is typical to that area. So, I mean, this could even be an opportunity to call out the significant tribal names for places. If we did a system of 2 names, maybe one that would be in general use that would use the Roman alphabet, and then a nod to the dominant tribal name, you know, or the dominant Hispano name, or whatever, you know, whatever might be appropriate in any given part of the state. So I wondered if there could be a recognition that there might be more than one name, but one would be more generally used and pronounceable by more people. I think that could be important.
Tim, can I weigh in here really quickly? After having reviewed multiple documents, and I'm not sure where this came from, but there may be requirements of the USBGN that are embedded in here that we need to be careful of. And Jenny Runyon let us know that she would be late to the call. So as we consider these things, she will also have an overlay over this document to make sure that we're in compliance with their requirements. And for some reason, this is flagging for me as a USBGN requirement, but we can definitely continue to look into it, and it's a great recommendation.
And to this point, Director Redhorse?
I understand that, I guess, the recommendation to use 2 names, you know, I think specifically in English, because this is the primary language. However, you know, I think when we're talking about othering other names to our natural resources, then it marginalizes our indigenous or, you know, Chicano communities that had, again, originally were stewards of the land. And then it goes into, actually, when we're talking about like dominant tribal nations, you know, multiple tribes, indigenous tribal nations were using all of these lands consecutively. So, you know, I think that could cause further conversation, or, you know, when we're using such phrases as dominant tribal lands or tribal nations to the lands itself.
Okay, that's a good point. Representative Benavides.
I have a different comment, but on this, because the way I read this, it's just saying to use the Roman alphabet. So most indigenous languages were oral. I'm not sure of the written ones that are in everything I've seen written in indigenous, those languages still use Roman letters. It's not like, say, Chinese, that the language isn't in the Roman alphabet. And you mentioned Chicano, Latino names that are in Spanish. They're written in the Roman alphabet, even though they're in Spanish. So, I mean, Colorado is a Spanish word, but it's written in the Roman alphabet. So that's the way I read this. It would be only objectionable if there was a language, like if we name something a Chinese name, and then the Chinese translation is not in the Roman alphabet. That's how I'm reading this, not that you couldn't use a different language. And I don't know if Ms. Beatty could clarify that.
I actually would prefer to have Jenny Runyon weigh in on some of these questions, but I think you're probably right that as long as it's written in, that it's not in characters that are not in Roman characters, we should be fine. Lindsay Ratcliffe, who has been working on this document as well pretty tirelessly, also reminded me that the USBGN requires one name. So there will be we should have these discussions and push these ideas out, and then we will have an opportunity to tag back up with Jenny again to make sure that the direction that we're going in comports with what the USBGN's expectations and rules are. Okay, sound good? Especially since this gets to be a working document. I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to try some of these things on for size and then run them down as the ideas come out.
Okay. Yes, Representative Benavides.
Yeah, so my other comment went back to Director Garcia's comment that I think that I like the group that's under the second bold, which is they'll be discouraged. But the others under that first one, proposals can just maybe considerations for the board to consider on proposals, whatever we finally agree to on those top 4 plus the ones on naming them after individuals. Those are all considerations, but I don't think we need to weight them, which ones other than the ones we discourage, and added, you have other considerations, but just to make sure that we know we can look at other things and then we could weight them ourselves once we get them, but it's just some of the things to consider.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations in terms of editing this then?
I would just say considerations. You have it for the, where is it? It starts at the bottom. Proposals should consider the following, in evaluating proposals. The board should consider some of the following things, and then just list them all under that, and then a separate ones for ones we discourage. I mean, I don't think there's a disagreement on discouraging the ones we really don't want, but the other ones do provide more weight to those if we say we favor. Because then what if it is a person and there's a real reason why it should be that person, and we've said we're giving these ones that we favor more weight than the person, which is a separate bullet.
Hey,
Okay.
Kim, I think I can operationalize Director Benavidez's comments. I think what I heard her say was we don't need that top group. Proposals containing the following characteristics will be favored, that we just eliminate it. The disfavored section certainly spells out, gives people an idea of what not to bring, and then maybe put the last section, the proposals containing the following characteristics oh, sorry, there's others, but put that up at the top. Is that, Director Benavides, is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, it's just for us to consider that, but we can weight them however we want.
Thoughts? Comments? I think I like that. Okay, we'll go ahead and move the following, the characteristics that will be discouraged up there then. Okay. That's actually a pretty simple solution. Any other comments? Okay, it is 10:30. How are we doing? Still good? Okay, we are now on to, let me find my place. Sorry if I'm making anybody seasick scrolling through this. Okay, so that then gets us through our initial, the second consideration, brings us through, and then we vote to move it forward into the final consideration. That's where we left off. Representative Benavides. I'm sorry, mute.
Which one of these are you on?
So we are now moving on to final consideration.
Okay, before final consideration, I want to make sure people understood on 4, Roman numeral 4, that one right there. If the board votes to make a preliminary recommendation, the board proposal steward or committee, which we were talking about above, which I'm not sure we came to, will compile all research, public comments for the preliminary recommendation and other relevant information for dissemination. That's putting that requirement on whoever the steward is. Is that what we intend?
Thoughts on that, because that is a very important distinction here that Representative Benavides has put out. I think this is kind of, again, to help kind of break up the work a little bit and then provide or consolidate all of the relevant information regarding the proposal that then gets moved forward to final consideration. Any concerns? We will give that a test run then when we kind of work this through the process. Okay, moving on to final consideration. This is the phase of the process during which we may decide by vote to approve or deny a proposal, utilizing the voting procedures outlined in the bylaws. The following here will occur. We will discuss the proposal and evaluate the proposal based on the criteria outlined in Appendix B. That was the appendix we were just discussing. We will conduct a vote to approve or deny the name change proposal. And again, public comment will be welcome at this stage. I think actually we may want to probably rearrange those so that you have the public comment and then conduct the vote is the final step. We will, I think, do that. And then once the board has voted to approve or deny the board proposal steward proposal committee will finalize and compile all relevant information into a package for circulation. And it gives that information. Yes.
Could I reiterate my first a very brief comment where on final consideration D, you say by which the board may decide by vote to approve. Do we have an option? Aren't we going to decide when we do final consideration? We're going to vote to approve or deny. So I didn't know why it says may. It's right over here by D.
Yeah, AG Beatty.
Director Benavides, the executive order has a provision in it that specifies that you are not required to take up or vote on a name change. So we were trying to figure out how to embed that in here, because the process is really sort of barreling towards all name changes will be considered. And if that's what you all would like, you could change may to shall or will. But if you want some ability to lean a little bit more into that authorization in the executive order, that's what we were going at here. And it's really the only place in the document where we've tried to figure out what to do with that provision in the executive order, and would be totally open to other ideas of whether or not you guys want to exercise that ability to just simply pass on a proposal.
Couldn't you say that by which the board shall decide by vote to approve, deny, or table a proposal? And I think that goes with the executive order, but it makes us take an affirmative action of something.
Okay, so switch the may to shall.
But also say approve, deny, or table a proposal.
Okay.
And then on Roman numeral 4, the small 4, that, I'm just going to raise it again, it's also the steward, whoever that is, or committee that's compiling all of this. So.
Any thoughts, comments? Okay, that's something we can continue to give a whirl and see how we work through that. This will be new for all of us, so we're not sure exactly what kind of this all entails or not yet, but we can certainly visit this at some point, because that is a time commitment. Okay, so then that is wraps up essentially the final consideration. And then we've got public comment. It identifies how we will take public comment and how to provide those written and electronically. We do also want to, based on our conversation, make sure that we allow for verbal, oral public comment during our meetings as well.
And Tim, can I just ask a really quick question here? What this paragraph that is highlighted right now, B, any interested party who wishes to present testimony, it actually contemplates oral testimony. And so I just want to make sure that I might have missed some nuance in that discussion where maybe it's that somebody just gets to show up at the meeting and throw their hat in the ring and say, I want to say something, rather than going through this process. But the public comment process did contemplate oral testimony. So I just want to make sure that I run this down to the ground so that we know how to make whatever revisions we need to.
Okay, that's fine. Representative Benavides.
Yeah, and that was me. And I guess I should have clarified, it was this process that it contemplates that they have to submit a notice of intent or of interest in providing public comment 5 days in advance in order to do that. But again, we have public comment on every agenda. And so this process, you know, to me, discourages public comment. I don't know why we would need them to submit that, because then that's more paperwork for everybody to do, to track that. I mean, we have a system in the legislature where people can, when they were doing it by Zoom, they would have to tell us, I don't remember, Perry or or Tony would know if they had to tell us a day or two in advance and we would get them on Zoom. But now anybody can do it, and they have to tell us a little in advance so we can get them registered for Zoom. But I think our Zoom meetings are public and they just would want to let us know. So, you know, maybe looking at that process, but this, I don't think it really encourages people to speak to it.
Yeah, I think this is, I actually agree with you, Benavides, in terms of, I think maybe just allowing public comment at our meetings and identifying that. This is, I'm wondering, we do in terms of these online meetings, it helps sometimes depending on the level of public interest to identify. We do this with Parks and Wildlife. We identify public comment up front that helps us kind of manage some of the more popular issues. And so we could set this aside in terms of if we think we've got one of those proposals, we might want to try and reach out to the public to have them at least identify and kind of schedule up for this. But otherwise, I'm fine with just generally allowing public comment at our meetings. AG Beatty, you're off the mute button there.
Yeah. I think there is a way to accommodate all the needs, and that is to say that it would be preferred to have someone submit. We can shorten the time frame to 2 to 3 days, but I absolutely agree with you that having some kind of knowledge in advance of how much public interest there is in providing testimony is really helpful in terms of understanding how long the agenda needs to be. And so it is a management tool. And I also think that there can be language in there that says, of course, the board will accept public comment on the day of as needed, or the chair may approve comment day of as needed. And this is also designed to be public comment that is very specific to the proposal that's before the board, rather than sort of generic public comment, which the board can also include in its agendas. Does that help?
That does help. Here, what I'm wondering though is, I'm thinking about maybe just more of encourage, and we can play with that and just say that individuals wishing to provide public testimony are encouraged to contact us. But I'm actually wondering if that is just more appropriate for that public-facing kind of document or instructions in terms of publicly addressing the naming advisory board here. But so yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength though in terms of encouraging public comment, allowing it at our meetings, and then maybe if we could have a line about encouraging that individuals to at least let us know would be helpful. Thoughts,
hey,
comments?
Tim, this is Representative Exum. I think.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. What was that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can now. Go for it.
This is Representative Exum. I think Representative Benavides is right. Ours says that they'll be allowed to do public testimony during hearings, but they're encouraged to provide written testimony before. So I think encouraged is good, but I believe ours says they will be allowed to do it on the day of, but encouraged to do before.
Okay, any other comments? I think we certainly understand the direction here, and we will rework that language and bring that back based on this conversation. Okay. Here's what I want to do. I think the next couple steps here, section 5 is reconsideration of proposals, identifies some scenarios under which we may reconsider naming proposals. And then section 6 is forwarding the approved names to the governor. We have to continue to communicate that with the governor's office. And so I think this is going to take a final conversation with them, and we'll bring that back. Generally speaking, I don't know if anybody has a comment regarding this matter that you'd like us to take into consideration with those discussions. Okay, and then forwarding the approved names to the USBGN. We can also walk that through, double check that with Ms. Runyon at the BGN in terms of how that is all packaged and then communicated and bring that back. Now, with it being 10:45 here, if we don't mind, I think we've got some marching orders here in terms of correcting this document, also creating a public facing in terms of instructions for this. So I'd like us to then go back and we will rework this and send it back out. I think this was a very good discussion and appreciate that. Is there any further comments or last comments regarding this document, Representative Benavides?
My only comment was we went through it real quickly on the names, proof names to the governor on section 6. It just says governor will comment, approve, or reject. Wouldn't we want a letter or something if he approves it that would be included in the package to the federal government? That we might want to address that somewhere in there.
Okay, that's a good comment. Okay, perfect. With that then, let's stop there on this document. Again, I really appreciate all of the thoughtful conversation and input here. And move on to the next agenda item. I want to get us out of here on time, seeing that it is 10:47. And now I am going to stop sharing for a second so I can get up the right document here. Okay, next item on our agenda is to approve the conflicts document, guidance document. And I will share my screen again. And this was in our packets, basically. This is rather what I would characterize as straightforward conflict of interest language that has been provided by the AG's office. Is there any discussion or comment regarding the conflict of interest? Representative Benavides.
Yeah, I'm not sure some of it's so straightforward because the definition of actual conflict of interest, honestly, it says because it's on page 1, number 1, that because a member has a closed mind on a matter relevant. I don't even really know what that means. How can they, what a closed mind? Usually the actual conflict of interest goes down to the financial interest, like they own a piece of that property or they can make money off of change because of tourism or something like that, but goes to more of an actual conflict of interest, not that they have a closed mind on a matter. I don't know how we prove any of that or do that.
Okay. Any conversation, discussion, thoughts?
I guess I would be curious about what, if that is in the other states. But I wonder if there is something on the order of has made public statements that indicate a position already taken. Is that what that was supposed to be about? Or but where the person is on public record before joining the board of saying, I hate that name, or I will fight for its preservation, or whatever. Is there something about the previous statements?
Let me go to AG Beatty, and then Dr. Way, I'm assuming you're queuing up here to say something.
Yeah, so I want to frame this document and what it's intended to do, because I think it will help with some of the discussion. Colorado really only has a statute that governs financial conflicts of interest. It is incredibly limited. And what we were trying to do here is to establish a conflict of interest process that goes beyond just that statutory obligation. So there's the financial interest very clearly spelled out in statute with, you know, a pretty significant level of risk for not sort of self-monitoring financial conflicts of interest. But there is feeling at the Attorney General's office, and sort of this is reflected in best practices across boards and commissions, that it doesn't go far enough, that we want to make sure that boards and commissions, which are stewards of a public interest, are held to higher standards. So we've tried to establish a framework in our conflict of interest documents that provide more there. So yes, Director Limerick, this is designed to get at if somebody comes to the table, you know, having been very clear on the record publicly that they feel a particular way, that we want to make sure that our decision-making process clearly pushes that out into the open so that folks are aware of it. There are all kinds of other scenarios that roll up into the actual and apparent that aren't just incorporated in that statutory driver. So if we didn't get it right, we're absolutely fine moving pieces around so that what you have is apparent and actual, reflects what the board wants. That's very easy for us, but we are encouraging this board to move beyond just that financial statutory provision and consider other things so that the public faith in your decision-making process will continue to be high.
You know, that sounds great theoretically, but honestly, I'll give you a good example. I have publicly said, I don't think Mount Evans should be called Mount Evans. I've publicly said that many times in the past. And I know we're going to have a proposal that's considered. I don't consider that a conflict of interest, even though I've publicly stated that I oppose that. And I don't know what people are going to bring forward. I know there's been other proposals, but maybe there's people that really wanted to stay Mount Evans that will come forward. So that's what you run into when you do that. And I know we should go beyond financial interest, but I think we should really also say a financial conflict of interest, not just a financial interest. Because when you go to the back for the disclosures, you don't list the financial interests.
Okay, Dr. Wei.
Yes, I've been finding the discussion to be quite interesting thus far. Let me first of all say, I agree that I usually think of conflicts of interest to be financial. So I know where Representative Benavides is coming from. At the same time, we live in a particular period of time which some people have described as a period of post-truth, where some people will step forward, you know, and violate what has been stated as objective by trying to perpetrate some sort of falsehood. And I think that we should be in a position, and perhaps this is where, you know, Amy is coming from, that we should be in a position to say so, and not simply accept it as a difference of opinion. I realize that that may not be particularly helpful, but that's how I understood the comment about objectively participate.
Okay, A.G. Beatty.
I don't have a reaction to that. I'm absorbing all of this and starting to think through what kind of changes we might make to the document that can reflect the discussion.
Okay. Looking at the time here, again, I want to be cognizant and respectful of your times. I think we can rethink this document a little bit and have some more conversations. We can also, again, solicit some input from you via email on this. Is there any other conversation or anything to think about this at this moment?
Yes, please.
A.G. Beatty.
Just a quick proposal, which is we have this notion of taking the guidance document for a test drive. We can also take the conflicts document for a test drive. So if a board member is concerned that they may have a conflict, they can review the document. And if they're struggling to figure out how to navigate the document, we can talk through it a little bit more and revisit it so that we don't actually have to move so quickly on adopting it. But I do want to remind everyone that the bylaws specified that the board would adopt a conflict policy. So I don't want it to, there isn't a time frame for it, but it shouldn't go too long. But we can definitely play with this a little bit so that we land on something that really works for the board.
Okay. Any final thoughts for Representative Benavides?
Yeah, I mean, we can play, but the reality is who's going to go back and look at this? Because when you go to the next page, on page 2, on the disclosure, we're just saying we're encouraging disclosure. So we have all these potential conflicts, but nobody really has to say anything. And it's up to the member to recuse themselves as you go on from it. So what's the real point of this? If we're just going to say, okay, well, let's adopt this and let's just wait. We won't even ever know if this is effective because people don't have to, and it only encourages potential apparent or actual conflicts of interest, which financial interest, again, is not defined as a conflict. It would be, you know, actual and apparent. I don't know what potential conflicts really mean in terms of this. And I don't know why we should encourage it because disclosure is just disclosing. They still get to decide if they want to recuse themselves from the vote or not. We can't force them to vote. So this document, if by just sliding with it, I don't know that it gets us anywhere. We'll never relook at it.
Okay, Commissioner Chimino.
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate the conversation. Please forgive me if this was discussed. I had to step away for a critical phone call. But as a county commissioner, ironically, 2 weeks ago, we received a mailing from the National Board of Geographic Names about the proposal for Gore Range. We did not take a vote at that time. We just kind of discussed it, and I described what we are doing on this board. I just wanted to notify you, Tim, and have Amy maybe give some thoughts. As a county commissioner, I think I'm the only one in this boat. I'll be facing the BOCC votes on several place names. My plan right now is not to vote during the county votes because I'll be seeing it later on this board. If that's necessary or if that's gonna be a bad idea, I look forward to feedback maybe next month from Amy. But that was my plan going in, is just to recuse myself from all county votes. I prefer to be active on this board.
So I have thought a little bit about that since those discussions did break in the news. And the way that I work with other boards is that board members are always free to call me so that we can navigate a structure that keeps them out of trouble and also gets them to to be effective in your day job and also to be effective on the board. So I am more than happy to talk to you offline to help you navigate when you're kind of serving in a dual role on these naming proposals, and help you make decisions about how to navigate lowercase c or capital C conflict. Okay?
Thank you, Amy.
Other comment, Dr. Way, you got something to add here?
No, I'm just delighted to be here to listen to all of this. I find it quite educational.
It's quite interesting. It's very good comments. Dr. Limerick.
Right. I think we got the recognition of what was aspired to with that closed mind phrasing. But we also were humble in knowing that we don't have the X-ray vision that would permit us to assess that in our conference. I suppose the person could disclose it, but then they're only encouraged. So, but I understand the larger purpose of it. I think I do. And so I'm wondering, and since Representative Benavides just went right in there and told us what she had said about Mount Evans, that coming out later would be concerning if I had made, I haven't made that statement, but if I had, and it wasn't revealed, and then I voted on the proposal, and then it turned out that I had said to the Denver, I'd written a Denver Post column about that, that would be awkward for me and awkward for everyone and awkward for the whole question. So is there something about, I don't want to call it public relations because I think it's bigger and deeper than that, but if we have said something that I regret to say I'm thinking of some national ways in which people are announcing their decisions before they have fully gone through a process. So that seems like the thing that we are concerned about, that someone would have said on public record something that said, don't expect me to just start from scratch on this issue. So how do we say, that's certainly not the right phrasing. I know that AG maybe is going to say, we can't say we're not starting from scratch, but something that says that, or puts out the statements in a forthright way of, this is what the board member said, and this is the openness that the board member still has to reconsider what she said, or whatever. So I'm struggling here, but I'm just trying to say, I get what's behind the closed mind thing. I wish I had the vision that would allow me to know when I was in the company of someone who had a closed mind. I could have saved myself so much time and trouble if I could have just thought, I don't know why I'm talking here. It's not getting past this closed mind. So I would be really happy if we could get the technology for figuring out who has a closed mind and who doesn't, but I don't have it yet myself.
Just a very quick response to that, Director Way, if it's okay if I just weigh in here. It was a while ago that I drafted this. It may even have been September, and I really should have dusted off all of the research before we had this discussion. That language may come from case law. And so what I will do is I will refresh my recollection about what the legal drivers are for this document also, not just that statute, but make sure that I've refreshed myself on the case law, and I will come back to you. Okay?
Dr. Wade, did you have a hand up?
Oh, yes. I was just going to say that this problem of a closed mind, we encounter that all the time in the academy, right? And things. And what I basically tell people is that, look, you can say whatever it is that you want, as long as you don't lie. As long as you don't lie. And as long as you don't manufacture facts, you know? And if you can do that, I'm fully prepared to entertain whatever it is you have to say.
Okay. Good. Any closing comments on this? We will bring this back and continue the discussion. That was a very good conversation. Appreciate all of your remarks. Okay, seeing none, kind of bring this here a bit to a close. I want to move on to agenda item 9. Is there any public comment? I do actually also want to make sure draw everybody's attention to the chat that has been going on. We had some comments from the Forest Service, and we appreciate those, and we'll definitely take those into consideration as we kind of move forward. Any other if there is any public comment, please raise your hand.
Chair Mock, Tim has his hand raised and is
sorry.
unmuted.
Who is that?
A public comment, if that's okay.
Oh yes, please go for it.
Hey, my name is Tim. Thanks for kind of taking public comments on this, and I would just say +1 to Representative Benita's kind of stuff on the ease of public comment. I would say definitely more people are very interested in this stuff, and the easier you can kind of get public comment to be easy, I think a lot of people would really appreciate that. So just wanted to +1 that one. Also, I wanted to support the comments from Dr. Limerick and Director Redhorse about kind of interests of some features like beyond the proximity. So I think lots of people, especially for Mount Evans, right? They don't live near Mount Evans, but you know, they see it every day and you can see it from up and down the Front Range. So it's still important, even if you kind of don't own property in the, you know, at the foot of the mountain. It's pretty kind of important to everyone. One point on the Roman alphabet, I don't know if you guys have considered like maybe using the phrase of like, you know, the Latin Unicode script that might be more inclusive and a bit more precise rather than just like Roman alphabet, which I think is pretty general. And then in terms of the languages, I think I also support kind of having the names in different languages, maybe not on the kind of map or in the database, but you know, if you guys are looking to change a name, I think getting a translation of it in sort of indigenous languages or in Spanish would also be very useful. And in that line, I would just say I support kind of the renaming of Mount Evans to Blue Sky. And I think it's important to get, the outreach and input from the, contemporary tribes that have a historic ties to Colorado. So I think that's pretty important. And if we have that Blue Sky name, I think it would also be good to get the translations kind of from Cheyenne and Arapaho, if that's kind of what the point is of kind of honoring that name. But yeah, that's all I had. Thanks very much for your time and for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate you attending and for your comments. Thank you very much. Ms. Abed, is there any other hands raised?
No, Chair.
Just quickly for the record, could
Oh.
the commenter state his full name and affiliation?
Hey, my name's Tim Swales. I don't have an affiliation. I'm just
Okay, thank you.
sorry. Thanks.
Public. Very good. Thank you. Okay. With that, then we do not have any executive session. We have a logo for the board, but I'm going to have us email that around and share that with you. It's pretty general in terms of the state seal. But anyway, we will share that around. We can have a conversation at our next meeting. Our next meeting, I know that we identified at the last meeting our interest for while the legislative session is carrying on, that I believe Monday and Friday evenings work best at this time. Am I correct in that, Representative Benavides, I believe was the conversation?
Yes, because I didn't know when the other people had committee meetings, but most of those that go late, sometimes Mondays, because that's finance, but that's later. So normally we're not meeting Friday nights. So.
Okay. We will send, we can take a look at a calendar here now, or for March, we can send around a doodle poll. What would be your pleasure in terms of those Monday evenings? Representative Will.
Doodle, please.
What's that?
Doodle, please.
Doodle. Okay.
Oh.
We will get a doodle poll out. We will continue to work on the draft process document, and A.G. Beatty, I think that we also need to have a general board meeting per state statute on sort of conflicts, and what else is it?
It's a board training under House Bill 1198 on conflicts of interest. Just sort of a board training and refresher on your role as a board member, the Colorado Open Records Act, how it applies to you, your fiduciary responsibility to the entity, refresher on the open meetings law. And so it's a lot of process. It's not the most fun, but we'll try to make it as fun as possible, just so that you guys are aware of what your roles and responsibilities are as a board member. And these trainings are required under statute to occur annually. So we've got a pretty good package set up, and we can walk you through the laws that apply to your role on the board.
Okay, thank you. So I'm thinking that we will focus on that on the next meeting, review the draft process document, revisit the conflict document. And then I think we may, following the March meeting, begin to want to really consider working with the BGN to identify some proposals for us to begin considering and walking through our draft process. How does that sound? Any final comments, questions, discussion? Seeing none, I appreciate everybody taking the time tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Dr. Limerick and seconded by Dr. Way. Any final conversation, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries, and we will get that doodle pull out and look forward to seeing you next month. Be well, everybody. Thank you. We're now adjourned.